Hello, welcome back to Equestrian Education. Today we are going to be talking about bitless. So everything that has to do with bitless that at least I know. And remember, bitless isn't necessarily better. It is different. You can still have the same amount of contact with bitless as you do with the bit. I know there's some argument on that one, but if you go to the Western dressage, they talk about contact way more, and in my opinion, I agree with them. It is more about contact versus just the bit. But anyway, let's get into this. The bitless options. So why bitless? It can be due to previous mouth injury. So if the horse has some sort of mouth or tongue injury, that could prevent them from having a bit in their mouth because it causes extreme pain. So you can have a bitless option. Too young or still have baby teeth. I know not everybody goes by this this rule, but I do have a rule that if the horse still has their baby teeth, then there's going to be no bit, because the bit only can add some tension to the mouth, and they're already having issues with, shedding baby teeth. And the baby teeth tend to be very soft and pliable. And if you talk to any veterinarian, they will explain this to you. Getting your horse's baby teeth done, like ground down. I know it seems a little bit like off topic or against logic to have their teeth done, because they're just going to fall out. But the problem is they're way more pliable and they tend to create sharp points a lot faster than adult teeth. So if you think an adult horse should have their teeth done 6 months to every year, then baby teeth need to get done at the very least every 6 months. And this is just so that the horse doesn't create any kind of compensation pattern with their chewing, because if you imagine if you have something that's just cutting into your tongue all the time and your cheeks, you're going to start compensating for that to avoid that pain. So you don't want to have that in your young horse, so you want to be able to get their teeth done. So that's why I don't put a bit in the horse's mouth, even a happy mouth or any kind of bumper bit. I leave the whole thing out, and I will train them with a bitless bridle. Riding shouldn't even start happening until about 5 anyway, so any time before that, it starts off as a rope halter, and then it goes into the lunge cavesson, and it's all groundwork until then. But it could be a rider preference. So say with my bitless horse project, that is a preference of mine. I have a point to that. There's a purpose for that decision. My training isn't exclusively bitless. I can do exclusively bitless training, but I do advocate for the humane use of bits and humane bits. So I start off with the bitless, and then I transfer that over to a humane bit. But and then early in training, so if the horse is unbalanced and not in self-carriage, I will train bitless until the horse is in self-carriage, because I want to have a very nice light mouth. And if the horse is losing its balance, tripping, anything like that, then it's going to start leaning on the bit. So any kind of imbalances, then I will use bitless, just so that the horse has less of impact on their face. So moving on, what kind of bitless options are there? And not all of them are made equal, I can tell you that. Leverage, there are leverage and non-leverage bitless, and just as there are leverage and non-leverage bits. So leverage bit is something like a curb, and they have the longer shanks. You have the reins at the end of the shank, and then it causes a leverage thing to happen. So a leverage action, if there's a leverage action with a bitless, it's both on the nose and the pole. If it's on a bit, then the leverage action is on the tongue, the curb strap, and the pole. And I forgot to mention the bottom of the noseband with the bitless. So the noseband, the bottom of the noseband, it's the same action that will happen with the curb chain and the bit on the horse. So same action, different setup because bitless versus bit. The French longe cavesson is a non-leverage bitless option, and that's what I use for my training for groundwork. It's a cavesson that can have a chain or it can be soft leather. I currently have a chain. It's very well padded and covered in leather. So it has the 3 rings, so the center ring can be used for lunging and for groundwork, and then the 2 other rings will be used for in-hand and undersaddle work. So that's that option. You can have a simple side pull, so that is also a non-leverage option, so it's direct pressure on the nose, so every pound of pressure that you have in your hand is the same as that you're applying on the nose. So the simple side pull does not have, or typically does not have, a center ring for groundwork. It's just a cavesson, and you can have 2 rings that are a little bit farther down so the pressure's still on the nose, and you have the 2 rings on the side, kind of where the bit would be connected if it had a bit, and those are connected to the reins, so that's direct pressure on the nose. I don't like it as much personally as a longe cavesson, because a longe cavesson where their rings are connected, it's more direct pressure on one side of the nose versus the other side of the nose, where a simple side pull can be less exact. But it just depends on what kind of riding that you're doing and what kind of precision that you want out of it. There is a bozal or a bozalito, which is also a non-leverage bitless option, and that you kind of want to teach some neck reining with that one because that has a different action. So both of the reins are, or the Makati is connected to the bottom of the bozal, and say an action for the right hand, the right side, will push on the left side of the face, so that direction. And it's kind of like a side pull where it will pull on, you pull on one side and then the pressure goes on the other side of the face to push the horse's face over. And that, like I said, that has its own kind of thing. The bozal should be covered in something smooth like leather or a smoother rawhide that's been hardened, and a bozal has to be shaped to that horse's face. So, you know, the horse's face has to be measured. You have to kind of mold it around a couple of blocks of wood first so that it's not just, you know, coming out wide. And then with use, it becomes more and more customized to that particular horse's face. So I wouldn't necessarily advise using it for multiple horses if all those multiple horses have very similar face shapes, and sure. But just as I would have a horse have its own equipment, that's part of that sort of thing. So I would always have a separate equipment set up for each different horse. I know that sounds really expensive, but if I were running a training barn, that's how I would run it. It would be a smaller operation, of course, but that's just for the safety and comfort of each horse. All right, so another non-leverage option is a rope halter. I'm good with rope halters on the foundational level, and they can be very beneficial for someone who isn't sure about what to do with their hands. So if a handler is unbalanced with their hands or fidgeting around with the rope quite a bit because they're just not sure where to put it, or a horse that is pulling and just has a lot of habits that you have to crack, or is extremely untrained where they have to have a lot of large movements to kind of help them along with things, that can be beneficial for a short period of time because it is floppy. It has if you connect reins to it, it has a similar action as a bozal, but the problem with it is since it's not rigid like a bozal is, it has very kind of muddy communication, if you want to say that. It's not very exact, and you end up doing a lot of large movements in order to get the horse to do whatever you need to. And like I said, it's fine for the foundational level. I would suggest it because it's something that holds up to a lot of beating, basically. But I would definitely quickly upgrade to one of the non-leverage options for a fundamental level. So if you want to check out the fundamentals course. So the leverage options, or a leverage option, is called a hackamore. So a lot of people will go straight from, if they want to go bitless, a lot of people will go right from a snaffle to a hackamore, which I would not recommend because it's a completely different action. People don't necessarily think about that because they're thinking, oh, it's just bitless, right? So it's all the same, right? It's not. So the hackamore is a leverage type bitless option. So there's a longer shank that is connected to the noseband, which is connected to the crown piece. And when you pull back on these shanks, it is leverage. So the pressure that you are applying to the reins is added with the shanks into the nose and just basically the entire face and the top of the head. So you want to be very careful because it's not a 1-to-1 ratio conversion. It is like a 1-to-2, I think. I'm not personally aware of that. It really depends on the length of the shank. On a lot of hackamores, there are some shank options. So you have the typical hackamore long shank, which I don't recommend to start out with. You have the kind of more Baroque like heart shank, which is slightly less long. And then you have the star or pinwheel. So it looks like a wheel or a star, and it's just a circle, and you have all of the other connector things, and then the connection for the reins is at the bottom, and it's still a leverage, but it's less of a ratio discrepancy. So it's more of a 1-to-1, but it's still like a 1 to 1.25 kind of thing. But that is actually really good, and you can combine it in what's called a cavamore, which I like to upgrade to if I'm going to remain bitless. So a cavamore is like a French lunge cavesson and a hackamore put together. And you can use that with 4 reins, such as the action of a double bridle. So it's basically the bitless version of a double bridle. And you'll have the direct nose pressure of the lunge cavesson, which is kind of like the direct pressure of the snaffle. And then you have the leverage option of the hackamore. So I like to do the 3-in-1. So you have the 2 cavesson or snaffle reins, just like you were to hold the reins, and then the curb reins together are looped over the left hand, so that your right hand you can give that one rein to your entire left hand, and then you have your free hand to sword fight. I like doing that because then if I'm navigating with 4 reins, I don't have to like try to give the one hand reins, and it is just a mess. So that also reminds me that the curb is a different action. It should not be used as the same action as the snaffle. So if it's all in one, it's a 1-to-1. It's a 1 movement use. So both of the sides are going to be used at the same time as they should, and it is a collecting, lifting thing. So that's something that you can do as a hackamore cavesson combo, and it is not supposed to make it stronger. It is different, and it's supposed to kind of transfer the aids from direct pressure to indirect curb type pressure. So you have that option, and then you also have what's called a Dr. Cook's. So Dr. Cook's is a cross under. The pressure is put on the cranial portions of the skull, and it is crossed under so that if you pull on, say, the right side, the left side, the entire jaw is moving that direction. So it's not pressure on the nose, it's pressure just mostly on the face. Not every horse responds well to that, and when it comes to release, it's not precise at all, and it's not a very quick action, and honestly, sometimes the leather can get kind of stuck depending on whether or not, it's just really depending on the weather. So I don't like that as much, but it is also another bitless option. In this video, I still like to go through the history of the bitless bridles. So that includes the use of bosals, hackamores by the French conquistadors, the development of the cross-under bitless design, and the creation of the Dr. Cook bitless bridle as well. So if you continue along this journey of bitless, the bosals and hackamores, the Spanish conquistadors introduced the use of bosals and hackamores to the Americas in the 16th century. These bitless bridles originated from the Iberian Peninsula, where they were used during the 700-year Moorish occupation. So I would imagine, and this is just anecdotal evidence, that if they didn't have enough metal around to use as bits, they would go in and use a bitless option that could be made mostly of leather. So if you need to use all of your metal for your swords and your weapons, let's just do a bitless option and stick a bunch of leather over the horse's face. And that continued with the use of the longe cavesson as a training implement. The cross-under bitless design, such as the Dr. Cook's, this actually first originated in the 1950s by Grimsley and was intended for rodeo bulldoggers in New Jersey. So it wasn't necessarily completely intended for the use that it has now, but that's the first showing of the cross-under style. The Dr. Cook's bitless bridle was patented in 2001, so it is somewhat recent, and was based on the 1988 design by Edward Allen Buck. So I would imagine this guy probably had the Grimsley version that he kind of refined down a little bit, and then Dr. Cook took that, refined it a little bit more, and then published it in 2001 as the Dr. Cook's bridle. So Dr. Cook doesn't necessarily own the cross-under style completely, but he did make it his own. So again, many people go straight to a leverage hackamore type nose piece without even thinking that it has a similar action to the curb bit. And many go straight into bitless option without any groundwork or additional training to get them used to it and responding to the new pressure area. Some horses do well, some horses don't. What I would recommend for bitless is to do either a 4-rein combination, so such as a double bridle. So you have your horse's bit, you have reins that are going to the bit, and then you have reins from the bitless bridle going to your hands as well, and then you manipulate both of them at the same time to kind of show the horse, like, yes, this is the same thing, this is just a little bit different pressure on the nose. I would actually do the same except reversed myself, because I start off bitless if I'm going to transfer to a bit. The other thing that you can do is a lot of groundwork and a lot of in-hand work with the bitless bridle, and be very patient with the horse, because this is different. This is something that they are way less familiar with, and it would be unfair to expect the horse to miraculously know that the nose pressure is the same as the tongue pressure. Some horses get it faster, and some horses just like, oh, okay, I get it, it's release pressure. But some horses will really fight against it, and then that's where people will say, well, bitless doesn't work, it's just heavier. Bitless is only heavier on the hand when somebody makes it heavier on the hand. Bitless migration needs to have a well-planned set of groundwork sessions to give the horse the best chance of a successful transfer of aids, which that's exactly what I was talking about, transfer of aids from bit to bitless if you're going to go that direction. The initial training in Bitless needs to happen in a non-leverage option. So do not start off your Bitless journey with a hackamore. Just don't do it. Find a non-leverage option. One of the options that I said in the beginning of this video, and start from there. You can move on to leverage later, but leverage options will give the horse way too much pressure around the entire skull area, and a lot of horses will balk at that, especially if they've never had a curb bit in their mouth. So if you go from snaffle to hackamore, if they've never even had that type of pressure on their face before, they will balk at it. They tend to, because it's a very confining feeling around their face, and they just want it off. So what I would recommend is a direct pressure thing, so the only pressure you're putting on their face is the one directly on the bridge of their nose, because that means the rest of their face is not receiving any kind of pressure at all. Bitless is also not for every horse. If the horse has a previous injury to the nose, has sinus issues, or is just uncomfortable with having pressure on their nose at all, going bridleless would be your only other bitless option. But I do not recommend bridleless riding around others. Reason being, the horse is still a flight animal. No matter how well trained the horse is, if something sets off that instinct, you don't have much to go by to be able to stop that horse. And you need to, for your own well-being and for your horse's well-being, you need to be able to stop them or turn them around. And a cordeo, as good as it is not enough leverage to turn a panicking horse around. So I would do bridleless if I had a sighted horse or a very well-trusted blind horse. But I would not do that around other horses, and I would not do that around other people, because the chance of an accident happening goes up. The risk involved is way higher. So you can enjoy that on your own time, but if you're going to be bitless, use a bitless bridle. If your horse cannot do bitless bridle, then I would recommend training in a nice light bridle with a light bit and enjoy your horse that way. Alright, but thank you for enjoying this video. I hope you got to the end. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and please give me a like or a comment on your way out. And if you would like to see more of these videos more often, please subscribe. And if you would like to be a little bit more involved, please check out the Patreon page, which is down in the description below. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and please be kind.